Hello everybody, welcome to First Attack here on the Chensor Dynasty, playing on twitch.tv/jchensor. I am James Chen, aka jchensor, your host, and First Attack is the series where I try to teach people how to play fighting games and to understand fighting games from a more philosophical and general level to help you be able to get into pretty much any fighting game that you want to get into. For a while now, I've been progressing down this flowchart here where we've talked about the neutral, and now I'm talking about pressure and advantage. Well, in order to properly talk to you guys about advantage and what that means, we talked about it last episode, where I talked about how one character can move before the other. I just kind of presented it in a very generic standpoint, a very conceptual standpoint. This episode is going to be very technical. There's going to be a lot of numbers involved in this one, and I'm going to try my best to make it as non-intimidating as possible. But you're going to have to kind of work with me here a little bit and, kind of watch it and see where I go with these kind of things. Hopefully, I've come up with a lot of different interesting ways to present a lot of these concepts visually. So hopefully that will make you be able to help understand frame data and exactly what frame data is all about and why frame data is so important to fighting games. So I'm going to switch to this view so you can check me out over here. And yay, I'm over here now. And we are going to be presenting episode 7 here. This is frame data. So, what is frame data? Look, I said early on, numbers are scary. Here's an example of a frame data table right down here. You're going to see this thing with, different moves that you can perform. And again, I'm going to use Street Fighter as the primary example here, again, because it is the one with a lot of the resources out there that I can use to present these concepts to you guys. So we're going to look at this frame data table here. This is one particular character's set of standing normal attacks, standing light punch through standing heavy kick. And you see all these numbers here, and you just look at this and what is this even supposed to tell me? And, you look at this, and when people tell you you need to look at frame data, you need to study frame data, and you look at something like this, and, it really does feel like school. It really does feel like you have to go and memorize a bunch of facts. You're trying to memorize all these crazy things like that. Don't pay attention to what the numbers are here. You don't need to know the numbers. You don't care about the numbers right now, okay? So even though you're looking at these numbers, you don't need to pay attention to these right now because I'm going to try to help you get to a point where you're not worried about the numbers at all. And it's going to take a couple of episodes to get to that point. So let's move on to the next slide over here. So, one of the things I talked about last episode was I talked about what frames are. Frames are a measurement of time. Frame data is mostly just a table of time length information. Remember, I said, if you want to interpret frames as time, so instead of asking how many frames does this take, if you think to yourself, how many seconds does this take? That kind of makes a lot more sense. Frames are 1/60th of a second. We needed a measurement of time that was far shorter than seconds to talk about the lengths of these attacks. So again, just to reiterate from last week, frames are a measurement of time. So there's a lot of information in frame data tables, but the part that you're going to look at the most is always going to be related to the time it takes for certain actions to actually take place. So frame data tables are designed to be thorough, okay? Because people want a one-stop shop for as much information as possible. So not only are you going to get this time information, you're going to get all this damage information. You're going to get, is this projectile invincible? Is this invincible? Is it airborne on this frame? You're going to get a lot of this extra information. And so when you look at a frame data table, you're going to just see columns and rows and columns and rows. And you look at this and you're just like, oh my, what is even happening here? And it's terrifying. But like I said, for the most part, most people actually use a very small set of the frame data table. So the question is, why do they put all that information in there? Because it's appreciated to have a one-stop shop for when you do get better at understanding fighting games and get in a deeper level, you have one location you can go and find all this information. But as a beginner, as someone who might just be dabbling into fighting games, and maybe now you're thinking about looking at frame data because that's what everybody tells you, oh, look at this frame data. You know, I'm going to show you the exact areas that you're going to focus on early on, and you don't need to really worry about a bunch of the other numbers. And again, you know, hopefully by the end of the next episode, you won't even care what the numbers are exactly, and you won't have to care for the longest of time. And in fact, only at, I think, the super highest levels do you really feel like you have to memorize all these numbers. But for the most part, you can make it through almost every fighting game without having to memorize numbers. And like I said, I will help you with that. So frame data is largely used for research and verification of what we know. A lot of times you play fighting games, you're going to learn things by feel. You're going to block something and then you're going to attack the opponent back and they're going to get hit. And you're like, huh, I think I can punish them every time I defend against this move with this button. So I will do this every single time. You can go to frame data and the numbers will show you that you are correct. But again, you don't need to know what the numbers are. You just have to know that the numbers showed that you were correct. And then you can forget the numbers completely at that point. Now you know, for example, in the future that this move can punish that move. This move combos into another move. And that's just kind of how you want to think about that. That's how you want to think about frame data. The numbers are there to verify knowledge that you should have already, or they will give you that knowledge and then you don't have to know about the numbers anymore. You know what the numbers tell you can happen, and from that point forward, the numbers don't matter anymore. You just need it to verify or research what is possible in the game. And that's really what it comes down to, is you want to remember what's possible in the game. And that's something that's so much more tangible and comes very, very natural. As you play fighting games, you'll just know what combos. You'll just know what's a true block string. And again, don't worry about these terms. You'll figure out what these are actually later on in this episode. You know, you'll figure out what a true punish is. And again, I'm going to present this to you very visually to help you guys understand. So obviously for different fighting games, the amount of frame data that you need to understand is going to be different. Some games like Tekken, for example, are very frame data heavy, and you really need to understand frame data, and you have to know frame data to be able to play Tekken. So let's talk about frame data here. In order to talk about frame data, we have to understand a universal concept in every fighting game. Every move that you perform has 3 phases that it goes through. Every attack that you perform has 3 phases. And these phases are going to be referred to as startup, active, and recovery frames. So every move that you perform goes through startup, active, and recovery. If you remember in the last episode, I talked about frames being a measurement of time. Also, I talked about them being like animation frames in an animated movie, right? So you see one cell of animation, they put the next cell of animation, the next cell of animation, the next cell of animation. You string them all together really fast, it looks like a fluid movement, right? You get the illusion of movement in that situation. So that's basically what this is. Every move, as they animate, 1 frame at a time, like punch, here we go, and now the punch comes out and it comes back. There are 3 phases of every single attack out there. There is the startup frames. The startup frames are all of the frames of a character's move before it can actually hit you. So what you'll see is a lot of times when I hit the heavy punch button, when I hit heavy punch in Street Fighter V, for example, my character doesn't just go BAP and hit you like on the instant you hit the button. when you hit heavy punch, the character has to start animating, and you'll notice that even if you're standing right next to the opponent, you're not going to hit in the first few frames of the animation. And then finally, like when they're fully extend their arm or something, you know, depending on what the attack is, that's when it finally hits. So all those frames that take place before it actually hits are the startup frames of animation. That's what's known as startup. The next phase of animation of a move are the active frames. Now, the reason why they're called active is because these are the frames that can actually hit your character. They're the ones where the move can actually actively make contact with the opponent. So you'll see pow, and it hits them. So that frame right there where your punch actually hit them is the first active frame. Different moves will have different amounts of active frames, but for the most part, you really just care about the first time, the first frame that the move can actually hit the opponent. These are known as active frames. Now, once the move goes, finishes its active frames and can no longer hit the opponent, the move doesn't just end, right? The move will actually have a little bit of follow through afterwards. So the person has to either finish swinging for their punch, or if they do like a back fist and they hit here, after they're done, they have to finish swinging. It's basically the follow through, right? Like you don't see someone swing a baseball bat at something, hit the baseball, and then they just stop swinging. They keep swinging all the way through. Golf swing, the same thing. They talk about the follow through. That's what you want to recognize the recovery frames as. These are the frames that will all take place after the moment of contact. These are the frames that your character has to finish going through before they can move again. So again, if you hit someone with something, you have to finish that move before you are free to do whatever you want. I talked about the neutral state in the last episode, so you have to finish your recovery before you can get back to the neutral state. And the neutral state is when you are able to do whatever it is you want again. You could do another move, you can jump, you can dash, you can whatever, you can start blocking. So again, you have to finish your recovery before you can do any of this stuff. So let's take a look at some examples of this. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to be utilizing a wonderful tool that was created by a community member named Frame Trapped Tom. And I'm going to activate something called the Hitbox viewer. Okay, so as soon as I activate this, this is going to get a little kind of weird for you guys. Hopefully this won't be too weird for you guys here, but I'm going to show you this right now. So here we go. A little bit of a sidetrack. This is not something you have to know for frame data, but I just want to explain what's happening over here. The way fighting games work is that there are interactions between moves based off of boxes, or in other games, actual polygonal collision, or in other games, sometimes there's spheres in a 3D plane of characters trying to attack each other. The only reason why I'm showing this to you right now, and it's kind of confusing a little bit to show this to you guys, I'm not trying to inundate people with too much information, is because I want you to see the hit boxes. So the green boxes that you see around a character are known as the hurt box. So this is something, this will actually kind of help educate people on how fighting games works. It would be actually really very useful for you to understand how this works. Again, I'll probably do a whole episode on this to be a little more clear, but the green boxes around your character are actually the areas that you can get hit. These are the spaces that you exist in. So you see Lucia's forward foot sticking outside of that green box. You can't actually hit that foot. That foot is not hittable in gameplay. You can only hit the green boxes that are existing on the character. Now, what you'll see is when I hit buttons here, you'll see it very briefly. You'll see the red boxes show up. those are the hitboxes. Those are what are known as hitboxes. And those are the areas of your moves that can actually hit the opponent. So in other words, if I sit here and hit heavy kick like this with Lucia, I'm not going to hit you unless my red box overlaps one of your green boxes. If my red box doesn't overlap one of your green boxes, it's not going to hit. Now, I know the way that the stream is looking, the red boxes aren't showing up particularly clearly because they're appearing very fast. So one of the nice features of this hitbox viewer is I can actually slow the game down. So I'm going to slow the game down here a little bit and you'll be able to see this a little more clearly. So I'm going to hit standing heavy kick, and you don't see the red hitbox because when it hits, it goes away immediately. So when I hit heavy kick like this, the red hitbox shows up. But as soon as I hit the opponent, the red box goes away because the move can no longer hit the opponent anymore. That's just the way fighting games are designed. This is the difference between hitboxes and hurt boxes. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is not to teach you about hitboxes and hurt boxes. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because I want you to visually see what it looks like for each phase of the animations for everybody's moves. There you go. So here, go back to my slides, and we're going to go look at this frame data, this very first slide that I had where I said numbers are scary, right? So these numbers here, and hopefully you can see them. Oops. Hopefully you can see these numbers here a little bit. They are a little bit small here, but these numbers here, for example, for standing light punch are 4, 3, and 6. You'll see these three numbers here, and you'll notice that in this column it says frame, and it lists startup, active, and recovery. Hey, look, it's the three phases of a normal move or of an attack that I was talking about. And here we see standing light punch, 4 frames startup, 3 frames active, and 6 frames recovery. What I didn't tell you guys is this is actually Lucia's frame data. This is Lucia's frame data here. So if I go back to this screen, I just happen to have Lucia on the screen. So we're actually going to take a look at this. We're going to take a look at this and remember those numbers. Those numbers were 4, 3, and 6. Actually, if I bring up this, it'll probably zoom it in a little bit so you can kind of see this. Yeah, so there you go. You see 4, 3, and 6 on this screen over there for standing light punch. So if I go back to Street Fighter V now, what I'm going to do is I have put this game to 0.05 speeds, and I am going to hit light punch here. So watch this. I'm going to hit light punch, and you see her go through her animation here. Now, one thing I want to talk about is that, you know, because Street Fighter V is a 3D model game, when you slow the game down, it has the ability to interpolate its animation. So it actually has the ability to animate in between frames. So this is going to make things a little bit confusing. If I had this ability on a 2D game, probably be a lot easier to show you guys. But what I want you to pay attention to is this green 0 number in the middle of the screen, because this will be an accurate frame counter for you. You'll see that it switches down slowly here. So, those are the frames. Those are the actual frames that are happening in this game. So what I'm going to do now is hit light punch again, and I'm going to freeze the game. I'm just going to freeze the game because I have that power. So what you're going to see here now is I'm going to let the game go 1 frame at a time. The reason why I talked to you about the interpolations is that Lucia is not going to jump between frames. She's actually going to slowly animate between frames. And again, that's a little bit deceiving. When you play it at regular speed, you will not see any of those in between frames. It's just going to jump from 1 frame to the next one. So what we're going to see here is that this is frame number 1. So startup was listed as 4 frames. This is frame number 1. So now we're going to go frame number 2. So here's frame number 2. Here's frame number 3. And now watch this. Frame number 4. A red box shows up in frame number 4. Remember that the chart said the startup is 4 frames. And now you see visually what that means. On the 4th frame, the move finally attacks. So that means the move has 4 frames of startup. So there you go. That is how frame data works. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now it hits. Then the second number was 3. It said 3. There are 3 active frames. This counts as an active frame right here. This is the first active frame right here. So now I'm going to go to the next frame. Oh, look, the red box is still there. So this is the second active frame. One more frame. Hey, look, the red box is still there. 3 active frames now. And now I'm going to do one more. The first frame that no longer has the red box, we are now in recovery. We are now in recovery animation. And if you remember, the last number that was on that box that I showed you was 6. So now we are actually in 6 frames of recovery. What's confusing right now, though, is that if you look on the screen, it says -5. In fact, it says -5 in the mod tool, and it also says -5, let me see if, yeah, on the Capcom registration here as well. Unfortunately, and this is a programmer thing, and I've confirmed this with other people as well, because this is a programming thing, they actually count starting from 0. So if you guys don't know, if you're a programmer, nothing counts starting at 1. You start count at 0. So even though this says -5, that technically means we've got -5, -4, -3, -2, -1, 0. 6 frames. We've got 6 more frames to go through. So this is a coding kind of thing. That's just how it works. That's how it works. But let's verify it. Okay, so 5, 4, 3, 2, oops, not yet. 2, 1. This is the last frame of recovery right here. And now when I get to this frame of recovery, I can do whatever I want. I can hit let it go, and then I can attack again right away. So again, you can see what those animation frames actually mean. Let's look at this slide again over here, and let's take a look at another move here. We've got standing medium punch here, which is 5, 3, and 10. So this is 5, 3, and 10. So just to reiterate this entire process, I'm going to show you now standing medium punch and what this looks like. So we're going to start right away with 1 frame. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Active frame. So there you go. 5 frames of startup. First active frame hits on frame 5. Now this is the first active frame I said was 3. So this is 1, 2, 3. Sorry, I missed the number, but that was 3 right there. And now 4, gone. And it said 10 frames of recovery. And as like I said, you can see -9 on the screen. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Last frame of recovery. And on the next frame, I'm free to do whatever I want. This is very important to understand. When you are in recovery of your move, you are stuck. We have talked about this during the neutral, that when you perform an attack, everything that you do in your recovery frames, your character is stuck. You do not have the ability to move. And that's why it's dangerous to throw moves out willy-nilly. I talked about this last episode. And during the neutral, when you whiff attacks, people can whiff punish you. People can take that opportunity to move and, dash at you. So you want to be cognizant of the fact that when you throw out these moves, recovery is very important. When you are in recovery of a move, and this is true for most fighting games, there is basically nothing you can do with your character until recovery ends. There are some games that will give you exceptions to that. Some games just let you cancel the special moves no matter where you are in your animation. Some games have special system mechanics that can just return your character to neutral no matter where you are in the middle of a move. But for the most part, games like Street Fighter V, like Grand Blue, like Tekken, like Mortal Kombat 11, while you are in your recovery, there is absolutely nothing you can do. But again, this is Frame Trap Tom's Hitbox Viewer. You can download this, just do a search for Frame Trapped Tom Hitbox Viewer. And you can find this tool and install it on your PC Steam version of Street Fighter V. It will require you to install a couple of other programs, one other program on your machine. So if you're wary of that, don't worry about that. But if this is something that you're interested in, this tool has a lot of cool features that lets you see this, that lets you study these kind of things. But the reason why I showed this to you was mostly so you guys can see what startup, active, and recovery look like. And hopefully this helps a lot visualize exactly what is happening. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put everything back to normal speed here, and you'll see that the light punch, which was 436, remember I told you everything happens really fast in fighting games. 436 is actually 12 frames. That's it. That was the entire light punch that I showed you earlier. That's it. That's how fast it goes. And then the medium punch, look at that. It looked long, 10 frames of recovery. You can barely see it. It's so fast. So again, now when we look at the frame data table, we're going to look at the same frame data table that we looked at in that first slide. Suddenly, this column here of frame with startup, active, and recovery is a lot less scary. It's a lot less scary all of a sudden. It's a lot less intimidating all of a sudden, because now hopefully you guys have a very good idea of what's happening over here. The startup is how many frames before it can hit, before that red box shows up. The active frame is going to be all the red boxes where it can hit the opponent, and once the red box disappears, everything is recovery. So you can see all these different moves, like Lucia's standing heavy kick has 13 frames of startup, 2 frames of active, and 23 frames of recovery, for example. So it's a slower move, but people ask, why would I ever use these? Conventional wisdom in fighting games, slower moves have more range and do more damage. So that's the reason why you use heavier buttons, because you use it for when you're pretty sure you're going to hit them and you can get maximum damage out of these things. There's more numbers to the side here, but let's not pay attention to those numbers over there. Now, one thing I want to mention here is a lot of people are going to be like, wait a second, James, you said that there was 12 frames. But when I look at these numbers here, it says 4, 3, and 6. And if I do math, that equals 13. James, what is wrong with you? Please bust out your abacus and find out exactly, are you Asian or not? You're supposed to be good at math. I can make those jokes, okay? I'm allowed to make those jokes. So, there are a lot of modern frame data conventions here. And this one is probably one of the ones that I don't like, but it is the way that all games do it now. And so we have to accept it. There are games with in-game frame data. The game itself shows you the frame data, such as Killer Instinct, such as Mortal Kombat 11. And all the games these days have it so that the final startup frame, you remember I counted all the way up till the first red box showed up. So on that light punch with Lucia, it was 1, 2, 3, red box shows up. I said that's the last startup frame, but also the first active frame. Modern conventional frame data notation will always overlap the startup, the last startup frame, and the first active frame. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to ask, why would people do it that way? There is one logical reason why that they will list this overlap. And I'll get to that later on. We'll see this as an example later on in the more visual examples that will come a little bit later on in this lesson. But yes, this means that the total frames is actually startup plus active plus recovery minus 1. Just to make it even more confusing. But again, very, very unnecessary to really know. As a beginner, worrying about total number of frames is almost useless. It is not something you need to care about. So I'm just going to put that out there right there for you guys still worried about looking at all these numbers and going, oh my God, startup, active, recovery, startup, active, oh my God, and then total active frames, I got to do all this math. And like, no, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that too bad. Now, I do want to mention one thing. I just want to throw out this multi-hitting moves, attacks that go like pow, pow, moves that hit more than once. So if I go back to Street Fighter V, for example, and Lucia has this move like this, that's one move right there that hits 4 times. Yeah, unfortunately, different games, different frame data tables will list them with different conventions. And as if it's not to be confusing enough as it is, different places will list them differently. For example, Street Fighter V's official website that lists their frame data, they actually skip frames in the middle of the move. They just add up all the total red boxes possible, and then that's it. So if we look at this move here from Street Fighter again, what I'm going to do is activate this move here, and it's starting up. Okay, so here's 1 frame. Here's active frames. Now, if you notice, the move, even though it hits multiple times, there are periods of the move in between the hits where there are no active frames anymore. See, it's not hitting. She has to wait, and there we go. Now the second kick hits. And now it's got another active. Oh, it's gone again. And now we're going to wait. We're going to wait. We're going to wait. We're going to wait. And then there's the last kick right there. So there you go. And you saw how in between the active frames, there were a few frames of kind of like mid-startup. Well, unfortunately, the Capcom website just adds all the active frames together. And that's it. They just add the active frames together. They just ignore those frames in the middle. So you can't even calculate the total number of frames properly using their official site. Back when I did frame data on the Shoryuken.com wiki, you would list it actually as active, parentheses, here's extra, active, parentheses. There's so many like crazy different ways to list multi-hitting moves. And unfortunately, you just have to know how it's being listed there. But again, the thing that I want to make sure you understand is it doesn't matter. You're not going to care. You're not going to care. And again, this changes the total frames math, but whatever, you're not going to care. You'll notice one thing about these charts here is that they list the startup, active, recovery. They don't list the total frames. They don't list the total frames because, to be honest with you, the total frames is kind of not useful. The only reason why I bring this up, like I said, not to confuse you, but just to let you know that this is a thing. So when you do start looking at frame data and you start looking at different tables and you go, why does this website do it this way? Why does this website do it that way? You'll be prepared to know that for multi-hitting moves, things get a little wonky depending on where you go. But like I said, as a beginner, as an intermediate player, you are not going to care about total frames at all.